Welcome to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. I'm so excited to have Sarah Rav here in the studio with me, and she is just an icon. She's a disruptor. She's here today to talk about her journey briefly into medicine, but then really the decision to pivot out of medicine. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
My gosh, I feel like it's just really inspirational. Anytime that we see somebody share their journey, really like doing anything, I guess it gives us permission to wonder how that could be possible for us or if it's possible for us, right?
Yeah. I mean, even before I left medicine, I was actually inspired by a friend of mine who did it first. So I think having those examples is so important to know what's possible.
It's funny because I remember there being some literature about the divorce effect and how divorces are almost contagious in friend groups. And of course, they're not truly contagious, right? Like a person in a completely happy marriage doesn't see that their close friend gets divorced and then suddenly now they're thinking about it. It's just more that when you see someone be willing to be a disruptor and maybe they're like, do I have to settle for this? Like I am miserable in my marriage. Then it makes you start to, also wonder.
Yeah. It's about having that permission, I think, to even want to do that.
That's amazing. Okay, well, do you mind just starting with kind of introducing yourself to everyone and a quick overview of just your journey into medicine and what that was like?
Sure. So I'm Sarah. I am a doctor in a very previous life, and now I'm a positioning and content strategist for coaches and professionals who want to build their brand through content. I actually started on the path of content creation when I was 14. So I started my own Instagram account in year 9 at school and was lucky enough to grow that to a point where I could run a few successful businesses off the back of that. But I had decided to be a doctor, and this was influenced by a few things. The very first of which is I remember asking my auntie which job pays the most, and she said doctor, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll go with that one. But there's a lot of backstory there, and money was a big problem with my family, so of course I was always prioritizing financial stability. But then as I went through high school, my grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's. And I think being unable to help her or do anything really really influenced me to want to be in a position where I could help. And so at the end of year 12, I did quite well. I got a good score and was able to go directly into medicine because in Australia they do a direct entry scheme, and I enjoyed it. I loved learning about the human body and disease. But I think when I started working, and even before that, when I was on placement, I realized that, sometimes practical application of what you learn isn't as exciting as what you think it will be.
Mm-hmm.
Alongside all of this, I had the content stuff still going. I wasn't putting as much time into it as I could have, but it was there and it was a passion and it was something that I always came back to. What I found was that as dedicated as I was to medicine, I would always prioritize my own stuff a little bit more. And so after all of that, after graduating from medicine, working as a doctor for a year, I decided that I would try something new and I went into consulting as a McKinsey consultant. I won't go too much in depth, but 2 years after that, I realized that I've just spending all my energy and effort pushing myself down this path that I didn't want to for the sake of prestige, for the sake of reputation, for the sake of status. And I just decided I can't do this anymore. I'm going to pursue my own dream, no matter how scary that is or how against the grain that is. And so in March 2025, last year, I made the switch and I am now doing this content stuff full time.
Oh my gosh. That's just incredible. And of course, I think that there's so many universal themes about what you shared, which include it's funny because I just feel like I so sought prestige and academic validation that I convinced myself that I wanted those things, and that's what's tricky. Like, I don't think that it was conscious. And if you asked me if I had like an addiction to or a problem with prestige, I'd be like, no, I just want to do this. Like, what do you mean?
100%. One thing I have talked about again and again since leaving is this what you want or is this what you have been influenced to want? Because if you ask me at 17, I would have told you hand over heart, I want to be a doctor. This is going to, like, this
Mm-hmm.
has been my dream for years. But then if
Mm-hmm.
you actually go back and retrace those steps, where did that dream come from? Yeah. And also, I think it's really hard to decide what you want to do before you've actually done it.
Yes. Yes. But that's what's a little bit killer about medicine. I totally agree with you because there's a lack of mobility that I think makes many physicians feel trapped, feel like they now are stuck in a sunk cost fallacy. But this is really interesting. And I agree with you that it feels like it says a lot that at 14, you were already creating. You were an artist, you were a creator and you had that medium. I think that it's so fascinating that you then did 2 years at McKinsey when you even left medicine because that is not easy. It's not an easy job to get or to do.
It was essentially me doing the safe thing again, or the prestigious thing, right? Because I knew that I didn't want to do medicine. And instead of doing the scary thing and going off my own, it was like, what's the next socially acceptable step? Okay, I'll work at the top consulting firm in the world, But yeah, I think what McKinsey taught me very much is that the world is so big and there are so many industries out there, and there's just so many jobs out there that you can do. And if you are willing to put in the work to learn how to do it, you can.
I love that. I fully agree that that's half the battle because when I knew that I wanted to leave medicine, I didn't really have like the language or the job titles. I was like, I want out. I would take pretty much any job, but it literally took trial and error and studying. And even now I can look back over the past couple of years and there were some consultant jobs that I took that were better fits and some that
Mm.
were fine. They were neutral. You know, I probably wouldn't do it again, but I only learned that by actually doing the work.
I'm very much learning as well that life is just an experience, and even your career is just an experience. And every job that you do, whether or not it ends up being something that you love or something that you hate, it teaches you something about yourself. It teaches you something about the skills that you have, and it teaches you something about what you like or don't like. And I think we get so caught up, and I have been this way as well. Like, it's so easy for me to compare myself to my friends who pursued the medical pathway and are almost consultants now. They're probably they're registrars, they're in the training
Mhm.
programs. And it's so easy to look at them and be like, oh my God, you've got your whole life sorted out. You know exactly what you're doing. Like, you're going to be at the top. You're going to have like the boss job soon. And I'm just here starting over again. But that's also okay because neither one of us are behind. We're just where exactly we're meant to be. And everything that I've learned up to date has helped me because being a doctor means that I have that professional background. So my target clients now are professionals. And then my McKinsey background taught me how to make a really good pitch deck, it all, and how to communicate. So all of that stuff, as much of a detour as it looks like, it has helped me get to where I am today, exactly where I am today.
I love that so much. It's great perspective, and I agree with you. Like comparison is the thief of joy, 1,000,000%. And I don't think that it's even helpful. It's definitely not strategic. I could just arbitrarily pick a million people who, if we're going to call it like the rat race of life, they're ahead of me in the race. But yeah, I totally agree. I just don't I actively have to stop myself from engaging in that style of thinking anymore. It would be really fascinating to know. So that was May of last year. We're coming up on 1 year since you left and really like took the big leap, which is the leap from a safe, prestigious job, whether it's medicine or not, into the unknown. And so even as you alluded to earlier, like there were concerns about reputation, prestige. What about the prestige of the new job? What will people think? And so I would love if you could just really share with us, like, what was the reception like when you left? And then also, we're almost at the 1 year mark. And so what is your life like now? But I'd love to see snapshots of both.
Yeah, so I'll start with when I left. And I think when I left, you're right, that perception was really what I was worried about. Because if you think about it, from the outside, I went from working at McKinsey to being a content creator. And sometimes people use the word influencer, and people use that sometimes negatively. So that was a very big jump for me. I think I'm grateful that I have been building my personal brand and my personal brand on the side, because that meant that I had something to leap
Mm-hmm.
onto. And because of the success of my brand, people knew that I knew what I was doing. It wasn't like I hadn't started content creation at all and it was a complete leap in the dark. It was something that my friends and family knew that I was passionate about and that what I was good at. And therefore they sort of trusted me. I knew that I would make something out of it. So that was helpful. I would also say, to my biggest surprise, when I told my dad that I was leaving, he essentially said, I don't understand why you didn't do this earlier. So I guess my dad's my biggest supporter. Like, he's the first person to like my post, send them to his friends, all that sort of stuff. But
Oh my gosh.
I know he's the best, but I never realized that from the outside, he could so clearly see that this was my passion and he didn't understand why I was going down this road. And I think I was also maybe slightly influenced because my grandmother, who recently passed in March of last year, and it is sort of the catalyst as to why I decided to quit. She was a nurse and she always wanted to be a doctor. And
Mm,
so I think I felt that by leaving medicine, I was doing her a disservice because I was living her dream for her. But I think after she passed away in March, I sort of, and even like before that, because I'd had some time to spend with her, she sort of realized that I was doing what made me happy as well, because I was talking to her about this decision, and there was no expectations or anything there. It was just do what makes you happy. So that ultimately, what my biggest fear was, never came true. I couldn't tell you about what other people are saying, like, my friends from med school or the people I used to work with, but also I don't care, because they're not the people that I wasn't close with and that would say those things aren't in my life anymore. Another really interesting thing that happened was that I started posting about my journey on Instagram and TikTok. And those videos where I talked about going from medicine that really broke me and, had me burnt out, had me anxious, to what I'm doing today, they are often the best performing videos on my feed. And I think that's exactly how I connected with you as well.
yeah,
So so
absolutely.
yeah, so the reception has just been amazing. And I think a lot of people are realizing nowadays that there's no reason to stay in a job that you don't like. There is no reason. You can, with like the internet, with social media, you can do whatever you want now. So how my life looks now, a year later, I'm doing, it's my days all look different. There's a
Hmm.
dedicated day for content. There's a dedicated day for meetings. There's a dedicated day for client work. But in terms of how I'm feeling, I would say I'm super excited. When I left McKinsey, I was so burnt out. I
Hmm.
honestly, like, everything was just a struggle. It was so heavy. Getting out of bed just felt impossible on some days. But as soon as I left, all that energy came back to me tenfold. And I was just invigorated, excited about what I could do day to day. I will also say, though, that there is an underlying level of what I call brave scared. And it's essentially that feeling that you're doing something new, you don't know exactly how it's going to work out, and you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone every day. So that, I think, is a new feeling, and it is probably the hardest thing I've had to deal with. But the more you do it, the less scary it gets.
Wait, and what do you call it again? Sorry.
Brave scared. So it's like you're
Oh,
scared,
brave
but it's because,
scared.
yeah, but you're going to work through it anyways, and you're going to be brave about it.
I love that. I really relate to that for sure because I am now actually still a little under 1 year. It was April of last year that I left the hospital. So, yeah, like I'm under a year and I really feel that. I feel like it's easier though for me, like even though that might not be like the most savory emotion, it's not as fun as just straightforward fun as an emotion, or joy. But I am willing to pay this price. It's almost like you got to take the good with the bad because I do feel so much lighter in a million different ways, but I do feel the discomfort of now I live at the edge of my comfort zone.
Yeah. There are days where I say this to my best friend. I'm like, I'm tired of doing scary things. I just want to sit in a room and,
Yes.
because like with McKinsey, as much as the work was hard, I felt like there was always somebody above you who's telling you what to do, who's responsible. And now it's like it's all on me. But that has its pros as well.
Right, exactly. I mean, and that's even the same here when we go from resident to attending. Now suddenly it's us, but you don't have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom anymore, which is nice.
Yeah, I think we are so influenced by the people around us that we don't realize. So that was one of my influences. I also think another big influence that isn't spoken enough about, and probably I need to explore myself, is being a migrant. So my parents migrated here from Australia, and I didn't realize this as a child, but now I see it so clearly. Like, they gave up so much for me, and so then
Mhm.
there's also that unset expectation. And if I talk to them, they probably don't even expect it, but I've just placed that expectation on myself to make the most of their sacrifice.
Yeah.
The classic prestigious thing to do if you get good grades is to be a doctor because that's such a heralded job to have. And I would say that there's probably some of that influence that led me to going down that path as well.
And where do you live currently?
Melbourne, Australia. So my
Oh,
parents are
okay.
from Malaysia.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can relate. Again, I see that so often, even for some of my friends here who became surgeons in the US, when they grew up in a small town, parents not immigrants, but
Mm.
grew up in a small town, maybe like less resourced from an education standpoint, and then they're the clearly smartest kid, like a young woman where the whole community tells you, you're so, so smart. You have to be a doctor. Then they say, okay, that sounds good. I want to be agreeable. I want to contribute to the community and to society. But I almost think it's funny how I love your approach, which I think sounds like a broader, like you can contribute to society in a million different ways, meaningfully. And it's not like doctor's just the number one ranking. Like I definitely push back on, I don't agree that that's the only top way or the quote unquote best way to contribute, right? Because then we're back in the rat race competitive thinking.
And I honestly, one of the reasons why I left medicine was because contrary to what I believed, I didn't feel like I was making as much of an impact. So
Right.
before I left, before I left medicine, as I said, I'd been growing my Instagram accounts and I was focusing on education and like study tips, productivity tips. And my videos were reaching millions of people around the world. So in a sense, I was used to creating impact and I would get students reaching out to me saying, you helped me get into my dream university, or I have straight A's because of you, or you helped me realize my full potential. So having that impact on such a wide scale, when I was working in the hospital, working one-on-one, and often sometimes sending patients home that I knew would go back to unhealthy habits or would come back a couple of weeks later, I really just felt like I wasn't creating as much of an impact as I wanted to. And that's not to say that doctors don't do amazing work. You're literally saving lives, but I wanted to do something more on that widespread sort of like foundational level.
Totally. I think that one thing I would love to ask is you were in a unique position. So you had actually started building this skill set at 14, clearly had a natural aptitude for it because that's pretty young to already be creating and putting, quality stuff out there. And so, like you said, when you decided to leave McKinsey, you had a literal, almost like a whole backup career waiting. It was really cooked. It had been brought to fruition at that time. So when you work with even like your own clients or when you're advising people who are pivoting, how do you advise them? Like, and I'll just share for kind of reference, like I definitely had an off ramp. I knew that I was leaving the hospital 1.5 years before I left the hospital. So while I definitely didn't have a prolific background like you did, yeah, I had a maybe 2-year cushion of work and redundancy in skills and consulting gigs and just working nights and weekends I had to fall back on. But yeah, how do you advise people? Because some people, I suppose, just quit and they hope the net will appear.
Yes, a couple of things here. I'll talk very practically and then I'll talk more universally. Practically, I think when I speak to people, there's usually two things they need to be aware of that they can't see themselves. One is that you probably have a hobby or passion that you already know more about than the average person, and that is leverage. Even if you know 2 years more ahead about like running, pottery,
Mm-hmm.
art, music, that's already more than the average person. So you can use that. The second thing is transferable skills, right? Like as a doctor, you have excellent communication skills, you have excellent stakeholder management, you have excellent prioritization, and you know how to keep calm under pressure. You also have incredible decision making skills and pattern recognition. Those skills are invaluable in any industry. And that's probably what led me or what helped me take the leap from medicine to McKinsey. I never felt, despite the fact that I'd never touched an Excel model before I started that job,
Mm-hmm.
I never felt like I was behind my peers because I had those skills, especially the problem solving and the pattern recognition stuff. So I can imagine that as a doctor, you would be able, and actually not even just a doctor, in any industry that you work, you have transferable skills that you can take into other industries as well, other physicians. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of sitting down and working out what those are and then finding examples of how you can demonstrate them to boost your CV or your interviews. The second thing I will say is that I truly believe that the universe or any higher power out there, or just the way things work, is that when you start looking for opportunities, you will be amazed at how many there are. When I decided to leave medicine, or when I knew I didn't like medicine, I had no idea what I would do. It honestly just completely blew my mind that you could have a medical degree and not be a doctor. But as
Mm-hmm.
soon as I started looking, like the first sort of month that I was like, maybe this isn't for me, I had to catch up with my old friend and they told me about consulting. And I had no idea about consulting prior. But as soon as I heard about it, I thought, this is perfect for me. But it was just being intentional about starting to look for those opportunities. And that's how you see them.
That is so great. It reminds me of my own phone background, which is this long quote, but the first line of it is nature loves courage. So when I do think about like the universe having one's back in that regard, and yes, I had that exact same experience, which is that I didn't know what any jobs were until I spent a couple months just sitting down and seriously like talking to people and looking at job postings and studying.
And talking to people is a big one as well. I think if you have people in your network that work outside of medicine, even if they haven't made the pivot, you'd be surprised at how important a network is.
I was surprised because, especially here, just speaking to like the US experience, you can become a full-fledged attending having never networked really in your life. Like, I would say that that was the case for me. And I even remember my business school friends in college, they were networking, and I was like, haha, that sucks. I'm happy to have a job that doesn't require any of that. And, I wasn't on LinkedIn until 2 years ago, until I wasn't attending, looking for kind of outside of the box opportunities. But I do think that that's one area I would say, in my personal opinion, I think that physicians are weaker at networking. Like, we're weaker at it because we definitely aren't taught it discreetly. We're not necessarily encouraged, especially in the traditional networking sense. Maybe in medicine, it's like, if you want to become an ENT, find one ENT that you like and follow them around for a year. Fine. That's not really like networking in the more industry sense.
I agree. Networking, so I always had this view, which is wrong, that that hard work, would get me to where I was. And I
Right?
think in the case, medicine is like that. You work really hard, you study well, you perform well, you rise the ranks.
Right?
It's not the case in the real world.
No. No, the real world is brutal.
Yeah. People reward visibility and who you know much more. And I think that is actually really nice because, yes, hard work is one thing, but building relationships, genuine relationships, not relationships that are transactional, it just makes the journey less lonely as well. And so I'm very grateful for the friends that I've made. Well, for the friends that I had who have supported me on this journey, even if they are still in medicine, but also the
Mhm.
friends that I've made who are founders, who are business owners and have referred me to my first client or provided feedback on how we're doing something or, shared an opportunity with me. Those things are not because I actively sought them out when I first started to
Mhm.
know these people, but just because I wanted to hang out with these people who had sort of a different experience or a different view of the world.
That's amazing. I loved the transferable skills that you called out earlier, especially things like pattern recognition. Have you noticed any trends? Like, for me, I would say that I think physicians, definitely surgeons in particular, because again, surgeons were not taught relational skills. So kind of anything that goes downstream of having good interpersonal skills or maintaining reciprocal and positive relationships, I think that that is a broad area of weakness for the surgeons that we train here in this country. Have you noticed anything, in all of your expertise and in your work with clients in terms of like areas that you would recommend if a doctor's listening and they're like, okay, where do I need to like, kick it up a notch and kind of learn faster, catch up in these skills? For me, I feel like for anyone listening, I'm going to point back to interpersonal skills.
It's a good question. I think so. Interpersonal skills, I agree, but doctors have friends. So I don't think the skill set is that far removed. It's just more understanding that at points in your life, you will have to not force yourself, but you have to make it a priority to build connections rather than sort of just having it be out of convenience because it's who you're working with or who you're closest to, that sort of stuff. The second thing I would say, and I don't know if this is Australia specific or worldwide, I think I've worked with some doctors internationally, so I can understand that it may be worldwide, is this concept of putting yourself out there and being visible. Because as we sort of spoke about before, in medicine, hard work will get you to where you want to go. It will get you to be an attending. In the corporate world, if you're a business owner in entrepreneurship, actually advocating for yourself, whether that's posting online, whether that's not being afraid to ask for opportunities and applying for things that you might self-sabotage and say, I'm not good enough for this, or, I don't completely fit the brief. Doing those things is really important. And I think doctors in particular haven't been trained to think that way. Because medicine is such a safe industry, you want to make sure that you fit everything entirely, that you can do it perfectly so that nobody's at risk. But in life and in entrepreneurship, you sort of have to put yourself out there. Maybe you fail, but at least you learn something from it and then you try again. It's that concept of consistently putting yourself out there and advocating for yourself because nobody else will.
Really beautifully said. I think that fear of putting themselves out there, and another thing I see with physicians is almost like the fear of embarrassment, like shame here.
Yes.
And again, I am speaking to just my own experience here on the US side, but like in medical school onward, it probably starts even earlier now, but like by the time of medical school, it's not only this quite a bit of comparison, but there's just shame in like, okay, well, I got pimped. I didn't know this question on rounds.
Yes.
That gets exacerbated in residency. And so even now when I work with some physicians, it's like just complete paralysis at the thought of I could put myself out there and get rejected or get mocked or be humiliated. And I really do think that the more that we help people like overcome that hump, then the freer that they are, because otherwise we're basically kind of trapped in one spot. You feel like you're trapped, and you really are if you're not willing to put yourself out there in any direction.
I completely relate to that feeling of, getting grilled on a ward round, but then it's something that is like only a professor knows. And you're like, I don't know why I need to know this, but I'm getting grilled for it anyways. McKinsey was really good at taking that away from me because they have a big like yes and culture, like they build an idea. So I think that was a good stepping stone for me. But even now I'm still learning. Like when I post stuff on LinkedIn, sometimes I'll get negative feedback. And it's a matter of, is this criticism valid or is somebody just having a bad day? And if it's the latter, then I need to not take that personally and stand by what I said. It is a skill. It is hard and it takes time, but it does serve you very well if you can overcome it.
Absolutely. Receiving feedback well and being able to discriminate between good and bad feedback, I totally agree. But that actually was my last question for you as we kind of wrap up here. You've been doing this, putting yourself out there in some fashion publicly since 14. And so you just hinted at kind of one way of dealing with this. And again, of course, I'm asking for a friend. Like the friend is me. Like I'm just saying sometimes being online is really hard. It can be quite heartbreaking, right? And so, yes, I think it sounds like one good way is looking at this feedback. Is this like sincere negative feedback? Is there something I can take from it? Or is it just a person having a bad day? But I mean, do you have any other tips, tricks, secrets for dropping it, not letting it ruin your whole day and week?
Yeah, two things. First thing is I always view putting yourself out there and like content creation, whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, as a service to others. I'm here to provide value. My content is either educational, I'm teaching you something, or inspirational. I'm inspiring you to act and improve your life in some way. And so if anybody has anything to say about that, whether it's like a snarky comment like, oh my God, why is she posting this? She thinks she's an influencer. That's so cringe. My clap back to that is I'm trying to help other people. Like, what are you doing? How can you tear someone down for literally just trying to help other people? The second thing and this is something that I have only very recently stepped into my power and owned, and this is especially so with the business side of things because I am doubling down on my message, is that if you are not ruffling any feathers, your message or your stance is not strong enough. So getting criticism or getting invalid, like getting criticism or hate as scary as that seems, means that your message is reaching new rooms. And that's a good thing. That's a sign that your message is spreading, right? Because if your message was weak, if your message was repetitive and everybody agreed with it, then you're not adding anything. It's not distinctive enough. As long as you fully agree with what you have to say and it's aligned to your values, it's aligned to what you believe, take, backlash as a good sign. Yeah.
Okay, very well said. And I'm going to have to just save that and put it into my spirit list and my inspo page. But I think that that's great. And to your first point, it made me think of the quote, "You're never going to be criticized by somebody doing more than you."
100%. You're only ever going to be criticized by people who are scared that you are outgrowing them.
My gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here, Sarah. It was literally incredibly fun and educational for me to get to chat with you today. I do ask at the close here, do you have any favorite quotes or kind of mantras that you're using right now? Anything to leave us with?
I do. And this has been on my home screen for the past year. I'm reading it off the screen. So I don't know where I got this from. It was a TikTok quote. "This is my rebirth. I decide who I am, how I show up, and what I leave behind. I am the author of my next chapter."
I love it. You've done so much already in this year, and I'm excited to see where you go next. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm also excited for you, and I'm so excited to be able to follow and support your journey.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You guys can find Sarah's info and connect with her based on the links down in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a review. Check out all of our other shows and content at hippocratic-collective.com.